Mr. Begley and members of the board, we do have one item for board discussion this evening, and that is in regard to some board policies. At this time, I will turn it over to Mrs. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Begley and members of the board, I have 3 pieces of policy with revised language for discussion this evening. The first one is policy EDE, Technology and Communication Services. This is revised due to Senate Bill 29, and it does have some pretty significant changes to it. A lot of language has been added. Previously, there was no expectation for student privacy on school-issued devices, but with this legislation, there are now more significant limitations on the ability for school districts and technology providers to electronically access or monitor school-issued devices. So monitoring of school-issued devices must fall under one of the exempted circumstances that are listed in the policy draft that I've sent you. And additionally, there is now requirements for communicating with all parents annually of all of our general monitoring that we're doing, but then if there are exceptions that we are monitoring for one of our exempted reasons, we have to provide communication within 72 hours for the reasons that are listed within the policy. There's been a lot of work done behind the scenes in preparation for rolling this policy out and how it's interpreted and how we make sure we're abiding by it. But our curriculum department and our tech department, they're putting the final touches right now on our annual notice that we will be sending out, along with creating the 72-hour notification. So we have that ready should we need it to make sure that we're in compliance with this new mandate that's come our way. The other part of Senate Bill 29 that requires a revision to this same policy is regarding access our technology providers have to educational records. I didn't realize this until we started looking into it, but as a district, we have over 1,500 technology providers that we use across the district. Because a technology provider can be someone as simple as an app, a company that has an app that our students have access to that they use for educational purposes. So we have over 1,500 of them currently being used, and with this law, we will now need to enter into what's called a DPA, a Data Privacy Agreement, that is specific to the Senate Bill 29 requirements with each one of those providers in order for us to continue using their programs with our students. There's just a lot of hoops that we as a district are going to need to jump through in order to ensure that we are still providing our kids with an education that has the technology embedded into it that we know we want them to have. No doubt that we will get through all of the hoops, but just wanted to make you aware of that. And I do think it's interesting and worth noting that while we are doing this, and this law only applies to public schools, our private and parochial schools do not need to abide by these same mandates. So as far as we know, they're able to continue doing business as usual. Just a little interesting information there that I thought was worth sharing. But we will get all this taken care of with these policy revisions that you see in EDE. We are in compliance. We do anticipate some possible changes to the law moving forward in the future, but for now, we are in compliance, and if any changes come our way, then I will bring the policy back to each of you for you to take a look at. With the revisions, we also needed to update some of the regulations and exhibits that are tied to policy EDE. So EDE-R and EDE-E1 and EDE-E3 have minor changes to them that just reflect that the privacy is now limited to the extent by law. Any questions about that policy change before moving on?
Yeah, I think I have one, Mrs. Howard. And reading this, it seemed somewhat burdensome, and you've referenced that, and it seems to fall awfully far onto the side of protecting the privacy of minors, maybe at the expense of us not being able to monitor school equipment and what's on it.
Correct. So that was the major concern as we read as the law came to be, and we read the policy recommendations. There was a lot of concern, like we monitor student devices on a daily basis as we are providing instruction to our students. So trying to interpret in the law what warrants a notification every time that we're helping a student do something on their computer, or there's a tech ticket because they can't access a program they want. Like our tech department will sometimes go and they will access remotely their device to get it working for them.
Right.
So thinking through all of those situations and hundreds more, trying to figure out what falls under requiring notification and what doesn't. So a lot of those things that I just said will fall under that annual general the general monitoring piece. On the policy, I think it's page 3 of that policy, there's 6 reasons why we would be able to monitor a student's device. And the very first one is for educational purpose for instruction, technical support, or exam proctoring by district employees, student teachers, staff, a vendor, or the Ohio Department of Education. All of those fall under our general screening, like our general monitoring that we're doing. So that will be covered under our annual notice that all parents will receive at the beginning of the year. And then the other 5 reasons on there, whether it be for we're looking into it due to a judicial warrant, or notified that the device is missing or stolen, because a lot of times we'll need to check the location of a device and log into it when something like that has happened, or to prevent or respond to a threat to life or safety. Those types of things are due to federal law, like if we need to participate in federal state funding programs. There's those reasons we can still do it, but they do require the 72-hour notice. So a lot of education behind, it was real easy to put the words into the policy, but the implementation side of it, there's so much work behind the scenes that our curriculum department and our technology department have been working on, and now we move next to that communication of how it looks for us, like how we're going to be implementing this policy.
Right.
We've also been working with John Clemens over there legally too, to make sure that he's in agreement with interpretation as well.
And if I could just speak to that, to the mention of a burden. So there are 4 of us here this evening. We've been in multiple meetings with 2, I think there are actually 6 of us in those meetings for multiple hours, just trying to sift through this mandate and what it really means and trying to figure that out. And those 6 people are also outside of those multiple meetings that last for hours, having conversations with our peers and colleagues in other districts, trying to figure out exactly what it means and different interpretations and all the things. And it's just another example of, it's just become so common for mandates to be passed down to us with just not a lot of clarity. They often result in a lot of questions, so just very difficult to navigate through. And again, that burden that it places on us. And we just want to make sure that we do everything the way that we're supposed to do it. And so when you work in that manner, it's going to take a lot of time. And this legislation is so broad, it has induced a panic in public education across the entire state. And just recently, we were told, I think Ms. Hauer mentioned, to expect more changes because there have just been so many questions from school districts across the state who also just want to make sure that they get it right. So just another huge burden, another mandate passed down onto us that lacks some clarity. So, but our folks are working hard and putting in a lot of time and effort and collaborating inside the district and outside the district to make sure we get it right. So.
And it does have an October 24th deadline of making sure that we have everything in place. So.
Right, Scott, thank you.
I've got a question. How come the private schools don't have to do this and the public too?
That's a great question.
Money, money, money.
Nobody knows.
I can't answer that.
There's no explanation for that. The comment made by a senator was that students are entitled to their privacy and it should be protected. But for some reason, this doesn't apply to private school students, only public school.
Any other questions before we move on to the?
Just no question, a statement to edit. Thank you for doing what you do, and you too, Mr. Smith, and the whole team. As you said, this is something, excuse me, that the general public doesn't always see or hear, the amount of time that is put into these mandates and other things that you all do behind the scenes that nobody sees or hears about, that is done so stealthily, but yet needed or mandated, actually. So thank you for doing that, and putting that time in above everything else that you do.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Right, the
Ditto.
second policy, oh, is there anything else? Sorry.
I just said ditto.
Thank you.
Thank
Policy EBBA, first aid. This is revised due to House Bill 47. So House Bill 47 mandates that AEDs be placed in each school building. I'm proud to say that we as a district already do this, but now the policy reflects the legal requirement. Additionally, we are now required to develop an emergency action plan for the use of AEDs. The Ohio Department of Health is developing a model emergency action plan for AED use that we can choose to use or we can develop our own. So after we receive that model action plan, Mr. Crapo will be working to finalize our emergency action plan, which could lead to additional changes to the regulation that's attached to this policy, which would be EBBA R2, procedures for administering the AED. But in the meantime, I just updated that regulation to reflect our most up-to-date school names, because the regulation still had intermediate school and didn't have Compass on it yet or anything like that. So we updated those names, but don't be surprised when I come to you with an updated regulation that's tied to this policy once we receive the model plan to model ours after. And then the third policy also goes along with House Bill 47, Policy JHG, reporting child abuse and mandatory training. House Bill 47 requires that district provide in-service training on AED use. So this policy was just revised to include AED use into the list of mandatory trainings that's listed on that policy. So, and you will also notice that these three policies are on the agenda this evening for board action, which is not typically our norm to have discussion and action at the same board meeting. But as I referenced earlier, this is due to the law for both of these actually going into effect October 24th, which is before our next board meeting. So we thought it was prudent to make sure that we took action tonight so that we could make sure our policies were up to date. Any questions? That concludes my items for discussion.
Great. Thank you.